So, first off, I'll go through a few of these. I'm not going to go through all of them. Do look at Mythic Spoiler. I'm probably going to touch on the notable cards that I see right now. And the two right off the top, obviously here, are Kaya and Dovin Bond. Both are 3 casting cost planeswalkers with very unique abilities. Kaya is exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. You gain 2 life if at least 1 creature card is exiled this way for her +1. Now, this is going to target spells like Jumpstart, and maybe in the future you may see something in Modern where it targets cards with like Flashback and other things, that maybe a Dredge deck or something like that. It may have its uniqueness there. Her -1 is exile target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 1 or less. So this does target, in Standard, you've got the Fountain. There's a lot of white weenie decks right now that are running 1-casted spells, like Haunted Witness. So there's things out there. There could be more single-cast Thopters coming out. Who knows what else there is. So it's something to be aware of. And her -5 being an alt on her, it deals damage to target player equal to the number of cards that player owns in exile. You gain that much life. Now, this ultimate, people are kind of overlooking it right now. I don't think this is going to be a major thing in Standard. You're going to see maybe a couple niche decks. Now, going into maybe Modern, if this card was around in the time of the Eldrazi back in Battle for Zendikar, this would be important because things exiled on a regular basis. So now, for her -5 ability, giving you that much of a spread, targeting their life totals and your life total, it could make a big difference, especially at the 3 mana cost. This is something that may be on some people's radar. I do want to say also there is the card Settle the Score that was back, I believe, in Dominaria. That card is probably going to go up a little bit because Settle the Score is exile target creature or planeswalker, or yeah, it's one of the. I think it's one or the other. It's not used because of Vraska's Contempt, but it also gives you 2 points to a planeswalker loyalty. So now we're looking at Kaya. You put her down turn 3. Turn 4, you settle the score on something on the board. She now has 5. Will have actually 6 loyalty because you would have +1 her when she first came down. So now you can do her -5 on turn 4, and then she lives and continues. So if this is a little bit later in the game, this could become something very dangerous. If you have the 7 mana open, she could do her -5 right off the bat. So that's something to be aware of. With Dovin, his +1 is until end of turn. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a loyalty counter on him. So in Selesnya, you have your go wide combos. You also have that in the Saplings deck, but I see this more going into a Selesnya Bant style deck with the tokens. He is 3 loyalty when he first comes in. When you do activate that first ability, it does give you that 1, so anything else that happens to get through in hits, which, because it's blue, white, and green in a Bant, there's going to be a lot of unblockables also going in there. This may bring the mono blue tempo into a blue white tempo deck. Who knows where else this is going to go. His -1 is you create a colorless Thopter artifact and you gain a life. This goes really well with Tezzeret because he also creates Thopters, and if you have 3 or more, you can draw 2 cards around. His -7, which honestly wouldn't be overly hard to get to because you're gaining the extra loyalty for combat damage to a player. You look at the top 10 cards of your library. Put 3 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. being able to dive 10 cards deep and just to grab 3 random cards that your opponent can't even see could be very devastating. This being on turn 3, possibly once again a turn 4, you could maybe, I'm not entirely sure, just thinking off the top of my head, turn 1 you can put down maybe a Haunted Witness, turn 2 Sapler Rings, turn 3 would be him, turn 4, I don't know. I still don't think you're going to have enough creatures on the board unless something comes along in white that's going to create more tokens pretty quick. The other notable card here, well, I do want to touch on Rakdos here. He, for a 6 cast, he's a 6/6. This demon, he's a flying trample, but the fact that he comes into the battlefield, then you're flipping a coin for each demon, devil, or imp. This is a very tedious card. I'd hate to be the person that goes up against this card while playing a token deck, because now you're flipping, you could be flipping up to 20 coins at a time by round 6. This more to me looks like it was maybe put in here for Arena, because in Arena at least the computer will just do it for you and you're not going to have to worry about it. That flipping a coin, I don't like that because of how many it could get up to. Then we have Ravager Worm. He's another 6 cast. He's a 4/5. Has Riot, which is the 1/1 counter or haste. You pick on when he enters. But this worm also has, I enter the ETB effect. Either it fights target creature you don't control, or it destroys target land with an activated ability that isn't a mana ability, such as Detection Tower. I don't know if there's going to be other lands in this set that will have other activated abilities. We already know that the other 5 Shocklands are in here, and the other 5 Guild Gates, well, 10 Guild Gates, because you're getting 2 art per. So there could be more that this may target, but the Detection Tower is the first thing that comes to mind. Because you're already in green, you're probably playing Carnage Tyrant, making it even more of a card that could be ban-worthy in my eyes. I do like Carnage Tyrant. I do deal with it a lot in MTG Arena, and I think it's one of those cards that you could easily deal with as long as you have the Detection Tower. Now, with this Ravager Worm, are you going to have to run 4 Detection Towers per deck? That, to me, spells a disaster. It may price spike Detection Tower now, so that's something else to look out for. So, if you have Detection Towers right now, hang on to them. If you don't, maybe look at picking them up before they go up a little bit here. Now, we have Prime Speaker Vanafair for Sismic. He is a 4-casted legendary creature, Elf Ooze, which is a very strange mixture of creatures. So he's like a gelatinous cube with an elf head. Sure, there's lots of speculation around this. This chamber is what people keep calling it, breeding pool, whatever it was called, I can't remember. I was on hiatus away from the game at the time. However, he's a 2/4, you tap, sacrifice another creature, search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrifice creature's converted mana cost. Put that card into the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. There is a possibility of this card getting broken once again in the banned colors, because they did bring out a blue-white enchantment that allows you to untap creatures. So now, if you find a way to get the mana going and everything in banned colors, this will be something else to watch out for. Seraph of the Scales, there's a lot of people liking her. She's a 4-casted angel, 4/3 flying. You can pay a white, she gets vigilant. You pay a black, they get death touch, and it's got an afterlife effect of 2. I would like to see a card maybe get spoiled that increases your afterlife count by 2, much like we had for the Surveil with the 1 blue enchantment that increased the Surveil by 2. It would be appropriate, I think, something like that to come with that. To me, this is not going to be anything crazy. This is more for a limited drafting mythic. I don't see this card really making anything too drastic. Emergency powers. We touched on this a little bit last week. There is much more hype with this card, especially with the Amendium ability in it. Once again, it's each player shuffles their hand into their graveyard, shuffle their hand and graveyard into their library, then draw 7 cards. You exile emergency powers. It's once again, in the Azorius colors. Once again, Bant comes to mind, and the one deck that's being played with Bant colors is Turbo Fog. This could be used and abused for Turbo Fog quite easily. There's also a possibility of this going in Jeskai, especially with Niv Mizzet and Teferi, making this even worse. You add in 1,000-Year Storm in there, and you're asking for serious problems. So now, say you cast this with 1,000-Year Storm on the table. You cast this the first time you cast it on your main phase, now you're dropping a Niv Mizzet. Then you draw 7 new cards. Those 7 new cards now trigger Niv Mizzet's damage ability. So that's 7 damage. If you have 1,000-Year Storm in there, and you've been able to get a storm count 1, 2, or 3 up, you could be looking at 7, 14, 21 points of damage. This can scale very quickly. There is also the expansion card that doubles. Well, that's 4 or less. That won't work with this one because this is a 7 cast. But once again, it's more things to watch out for. Spawn of Mayhem, forecasted 4/4 demon. It is nice to see some demons coming back into the fold for Liliana's contract, so that's another card maybe to look out for, because it wasn't doing anything after the sets were knocked away. There wasn't really enough demons to really do anything with Liliana's contract for the 4 demons on the board win the game scenario. But now that we've got 2 demons here spoiled, it might be something to look at again. Forecasted 4/4, he has Spectacle, which is if your opponent took a damage that turn, you can cast it for that price. At the 3 mana price, he's a flying trample. At the beginning of your upkeep, Spawn of Mayhem deals 1 damage to each player. Then if you have 10 or less life, put a 1/1 counter on Spawn of Mayhem. So I can see Spawn of Mayhem going with Doom Whisperer and the Argyl's, the flip land that lets you pay 2 life and draw a card. These 3 cards together, you could easily get to the 10 less life, and that's every round. You add in a Nexus where you're taking turns, you could end up with a very big creature in the end. Sargon's Hellkite is a dragon. It would have been nice to see it as a drake. It's a 5 mana dragon, 4/4 with Riot, flying. You tap 4, and it deals 2 damage, divided as you choose among 1 or 2 targets, meaning creatures, players, or planeswalkers. Activate this ability only if it has a 1/1 counter on it. So you could bring him in with Riot if there's a double Riot trigger, which there was one spoiled as an enchantment. This could then get haste and the counter, and you could do the extra damage. Hydroid Curious, the Seismic Jellyfish Hydra Beast. This thing is a little bit absurd. When you cast the spell, you gain life half of X cast, and you draw X half cards, rounded down each time. So if you cast this for 2, 2x, the X is 2, and in green and blue, then you draw a card and gain a life. If you cast it for 4, you draw 2 cards and gain 2 life, and so on. It's also flying and trample, and it comes into play with X11 counters on it. It is a 0/0, so please note that you do have to cast this for a minimum of 3. A minimum of 3. If you do not cast this for a minimum of 3, it will die on entry. So there's other things possibly that this could go with on the enter the battlefield death triggers, which in Tesra Kovlov, if a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So there is a possibility there. Now that's 4 colors, so there is possibility of these extra triggers going on. Well, we also have Precognitive Perception at 5 mana. Draw 3 cards. If you cast this spell during your main phase, instead scry 3, then draw 3. Instant, it's a 5/5. That's fine. Bedevil, 3 cost for Rakdos. Destroy target artifact, creature, or planeswalker. This will be a must-have in any Rakdos deck coming out as part of your removal kit. It is a cheaper than Vraska's Contempt, and if you're in those colors, it's probably pretty easy to get that off. And then we have the Gruul Spellbreaker, 3 mana, 3/3 with Riot Trample. As long as it's your turn, you and Gruul Spellbreaker have hexproof. So that just kind of stops your opponent from taking things down on your turn, which is kind of nice. We have the Growth Chamber Guardian, 2 mana Elf Crab Warrior. So it's an elf with crab claws. So it looks like he actually has 4 arms there, which is kind of odd because it looks like the normal arms are crossed in front of him. He's a 2/2 with a 3 casted Adapt 2, which allows you to put 2 extra 1/1 counters on it as long as he has no counters on it to begin with. Whenever 1 or more 1/1 counters are put on Growth Chamber Guardian, you may search your library for a card named Growth Chamber Guardian. So it lets you fetch up another one every time this gets it. Reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle your library. And we've got some taxes coming in. We have a Tithe Taker, 2 mana white. He's a 2/1 human soldier. During your turn, spells your opponents cast cost 1 more to activate, 1 more to cast and activate your opponent's abilities. Cost 1 more, and it's also got Afterlife 1. So we're seeing Tithe Taker now into a Deputy of Detention. This is a 3-casted Azorius Wizard. This could make Jeskai Wizards a thing. It's a 1/3. When this comes onto the board, you exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls and all other non-land permanents that player controls with the same name as that permanent until Deputy of Detention leaves the battlefield. So now you have a possibility with Quasi-Duplicate to start locking down and freeing the board of many of the same creatures. You also have this possibility, because he is a wizard, if you're going in Jeskai colors, you've got Wizard's Lightning and Wizard's Retort. You also have the wizard that gives +1/+1 for every spell you cast, for every instant or sorcery, and the other one that copies spells in blue. So this card is going to be something. I'm glad it's at rare and not at uncommon, much like Reflector Mage, because it did make Reflector Mage end up on the ban list because it had flash. But not only that, it was too powerful for the effect. We may see something similar with this, but it doesn't have flash. If you find a way to give this flash, it may make it unstoppable, just because you can do it in the middle of combat. Then we have Judith, the Scourge Diva, for a 3 cast. She's a 2/2. All other creatures you control get +1/+0. Whenever a creature you control dies, a non-token creature you control dies, she does 1 damage to any target. So once again, we have a sack outlet possibility. Borak Clan Crusher, 5 casted. He's a 4/4. You tap him, remove a 1/1 counter from a creature you control. He deals 2 damage to any target. So there's a lot of damage to any target happening here. So just watch out for a lot of these. This 1 damage, 2 damage to any target could be something in a draft that you may want to watch out for. I know we have it in the Rakdos and the Gruul colors right now. It's quite easily with the amount of color fixing to run the 3 color decks quite easily. Then we have Biomancer's Familiar. He's a 2-casted Seismic creature, mutant. He's a 2/2. Activated abilities of creatures you control cost 2 or less to activate. That's huge. This effect can't reduce the amount of mana an ability costs to activate to less than 1 mana. You tap him. Next time a target creature adapts this turn, it adapts as though it had no 1/1 counters on it. So that's pretty cool. So now you can make adapt. I know adapt and these 1/1 counters will be a thing. Once again, this is crossing over with that Clan Crusher, so now you can build up counters, get rid of counters, build them up, get rid of them, and just keep doing that. So once again, you have the possibilities here. If you can start untapping these creatures at the same time, you're going to start using these counters as a resource, doing damage, doing whatever, maybe drawing cards. We don't know everything yet. And, you know, we saw Absorb. Not going to go through many of the uncommons here. I'm just going to kind of touch on a few. There is your typical forecasted that we're seeing in each guild. For the Orizos, it's we have the Spirit. He's a 3/4. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card and you gain 3 life. Little underwhelming for the forecasted. There is this enchantment here. Now I gotta actually go into it. But this one is pretty significant because now in red-green, you have creature spells you control can't be countered. So this is going to shut down a lot of these control decks that we're seeing that's carrying blue. Hopefully this makes people move away from the blue color and running the Nexus of Fate garbage that we've seen all along. Non-token creatures you control also gain Riot. So Riot giving you haste or a 1/1 counter. So this is something that will be going in my Naya deck if I ever get a copy of it for Commander, as it's another one that slides right into the Naya colors for me. So we do have Mtgrna Utopian Speaker, a forecasted 4/4 Merfolk Wizard. This one I haven't actually seen, I'm just seeing it now. He enters the battlefield, you control another creature with a 1/1 counter on it, draw a card. That's kind of in the Merfolk thing right now. For 6, it can adapt for 4. Each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it has Trample. So there is also the Merfolk, the blue Merfolk, that each creature with a 1/1 counter on it is unblockable. So now you can be unblockable with Trample. Interesting. Lavinia, we saw that a couple weeks ago. Seismic Ascendancy, we saw that a couple weeks ago. Another couple here is the one that lets you untap is High Alert. Each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. So this is into the Arcades deck that is not doing very much right now. This also fits into a Turbo Fog possibility if you do a Turbo Fog with a lot of walls. Creatures you control can attack as though they didn't have Defender. And for 4 mana, you can untap target creature. The untapped target creature can become a broken effect, especially with the one that lets you search for another creature, dependent on the casting cost. there's more that this is going to do. I believe something could get broken with the tapping and untapping. In the future here, we just don't know what may happen. It could be going forward into future sets also. We saw the Rakdos Fire Wielder a couple weeks ago. That's the 4-costed Rakdos creature, dealing 2 damage to target opponent, 2 damage up to 1 target creature or planeswalker for 3. Now, the Sismic one was released today, being a Frilled Mystic, the 4-casted Sismic creature at a 3/2. This thing is going to be sought after. He's an Elf Lizard Wizard, which kind of rolls off the tongue, kind of fun. It's got Flash. It enters the battlefield. You may counter target spell. So if you're in Sismic and you want a creature that is going to do something, the Elf deck, you could be looking at Sismic Elves at this point because they're being mixed with blue-style creatures. You may have a Sismic Elf deck going on here, and this fits right into that. I wouldn't mind a few copies of this myself. We saw Mortify, we saw Light Up the Stage before. The split cards are back. I'm just trying to see if there was anything else. Growth Spiral, where it's draw a card, you may put a land card from your hand into the battlefield. That is something else that's going to be good. Oh, here we go. We have Smothering Tide. This is very unique. The one thing that I'd like to note here with Smothering Tide is this is now bringing back treasures from Ixalan. So treasures, to me, much like vehicles, are going to be a reoccurring theme. It's going to be here and there. Treasure is one of those tokens that can be consisted for anything in the future for that sacrifice this artifact and gain 1 mana of any color. So we're going to see this going forward, obviously. Smothering Tide, very fun in a commander deck. Whenever your opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If they don't, you get a treasure. So either they shut you down on gaining treasure and not letting you have extra mana, or they give you the extra mana and you get the mana ramp. That's huge. Mass Manipulation. It's a XX 4 blue. Gain control of X target creatures and or planeswalkers, and this is not until end of turn. So this is, I more see this as a sideboard card if you end up against Super Friends style deck and you need to deal with those planeswalkers. And there's no better way than to deal with the planeswalkers than to steal them all. We have Gutter Bones. This is another 1-casted 2/1. He comes in the battlefield tapped. For 2, you can return him from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only during your turn and only if an opponent lost life this turn. So this is quite simply, you can attack with a bunch of creatures, get through, hit them, activate this, bring him back, put him down on the board, as if he attacked and dealt no damage. Amplifier, 4-casted elemental. He's a 1/1. This is a very cool concept of a card. I hope they put some sort of graphic into Arena for this card. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Until your next turn, Amplifier, base power, and becomes twice that card's power, and base toughness becomes twice that card's toughness. Put the revealed cards on the bottom of your library in random order. So I do have a thought on what card this can go with, and it's the Pirates, the 7-casted Pirates. Yes, he comes in as a 4/4, but if you end up with one of those down on the board, now Amplifier would be a 8/8, and with the Pirate, their effect is doubling damage, so then it was dealing 16 damage. You get another one down there, it would be dealing 32. So there might be something with this. It would be nice to see a stompy red deck for once. I know this next one, being Guardian's Plan, it's an enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that create does not share a name with another creature you control or have in your graveyard, draw a card. So this is kind of rewarding you for diversifying your deck. Could be something more for a commander. I don't see that doing much in standard play. I could be wrong on that because it is a reoccurring draw card. Angelic Escalation, it's a 4-mana enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. This is okay. I don't see this doing much. Once again, it could be more of a commander, go wide. We'll see. Sphinx of Foresight, there's a lot of hype around this card because it's got a effect before the game even really starts. Letting you scry 3 at the beginning of your first upkeep is huge because that's letting you kind of manipulate your first 3 draws. Those first 3 draws can be very important, and you can set that up very uniquely, or you can get rid of them because you need the land. We've seen the Haunt of Hightower. That's your buy a box promo. We have N-Rays Forerunners, which is an 8-casted green creature. He's a 7/7 Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. When he enters the battlefield, other creatures you control gain Vigilance and Trample. This is going to go in any green stompy. Right now, you do have the 8-casted Mammoth that gives all your creatures Trample, but I could see this easily going in there, especially with Vivian Reed and her emblem giving Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible, and +2/+2. This just is another way to get that Vigilance and Trample, another way to get that damage through. Verity Circle, 4-mana blue. Whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, if it isn't being declared as an attacker, you may draw a card. So, if they have tap effects, this lets you draw a card. If you find a way, maybe an Icy Manipulator, it may let you draw a card. Tap target creature without flying for 4 mana. So this is another, it also gives a built-in tap effect. Pestilent Spirit. This card is an absolute mistake. This card will not be less than $15. Maybe at release, but this card is going to do wondrous things. It's a 3/2 3-casted, which to me is just too cheap for the effect. It's a Menace Death Touch Spirit. You have instant and sorcery spells you control have Death Touch. So if you have any things with red that gives you a across the board 1 damage, it's going to do it can wipe your opponent's board out. This is also a body, so the upside, one upside to the other, you still have a card that does damage across the board, or you have a card that's a 3/2 Menace Death Touch Spirit. There's not really a downside to this card. Rampage of the Clans, it's a 4-mana instant. Destroy all artifacts and enchantments. For each permanent destroyed this way, its controller creates a 3/3 green centaur creature token. This may be a sideboard, but if you're dealing with that many artifacts and enchantments, now you're dealing with 3/3 green centaurs. Maybe you make up a bunch of Thopters and do this to yourself. Yeah, I don't see this card going anywhere. You got the Homunculus. He's a hexproof 2/5 for 5. Cry of the Canarium for 3. We do have the Ascended version of this, but this exiles all creature cards put into the graveyard this turn or from the battlefield this turn. If a creature would die this turn, exile it instead. So this is a persist effect for the round. Something to watch out for. Because black is severely lacking in board wipes right now, this is going to fit into black quite quickly. Biogenetic Upgrade. 6-casted. Distribute 3 1/1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 target creatures. Then double the number of 1/1 counters on each of those creatures. This will be something you're probably going to see a little bit gain in limited play. So it's something to watch out if you have the Seismic decks in your pre-release kit. Maybe in draft. It is 6, so it's hard to say. This doubling the counters, if you've already got a few counters on there and then you're doubling them, you know, I'm just glad the green Gear Hulk rotated out, because that Gear Hulk in this would have been insane. And then we have a Quelch. It's a 2-mana counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. So like Spell Pierce, where it's got the limitation, this does not. This is now another cheap spell. If you have the Goblin Wizard on board, it now becomes a 1 blue. So you may see this a little bit more in the Wizard style deck. Now, Wilderness Reclamation for 4. This thing is way too cheap for what it does. At the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Turbo Fog is going to be ridiculous with this card. It's untapping all your lands at your end step. So at the beginning of your end step, but before your end phase, now you untap all your lands and cast Nexus. This is just going to make things even more terrible for that deck, and you're going to see more Nexus decks come out because of this one card. Unless they are planning on banning Nexus, this card is, you're not going to see anything other than Turbo Fog. When it comes to Arena, the game is going to become something that no one will want to play. I still will stand by it. Nexus of Fate needs to be taken out of Standard. It was a mistake when it was printed then. It's still a mistake being there now. Teferi being the second one on my particular list, and Carnage Tyrant would probably be the close third. Then maybe Niz-Mizzet. Those 4 cards are wrecking Standard right now, but Nexus of Fate is the one card. When I end up against it, I just walk away from the computer and let the thing just deal with it in Arena. I haven't played much Paper Magic lately, so I don't know what it's like at an LGS. Maybe let me know down below if you're running into Nexus decks in Paper. I would assume it's not as bad in Paper as it is on Arena. And then, of course, we have the new lockets. We all know what these already do, so I'm not going to go through them. The artwork is quite nice. I do like the Seismic one out of them all. The Gate Colossus, we're finally seeing that, and not the promo version. And we have our Shocklands got a Shrine, Hallowed Fountain, Blood Crypt, Stomping Ground, and Breeding Pool. So now that they're back in reprint, these are going to be sought after once again. And we still have the Guild Gates. I do, once again, like the Seismic ones the best. I don't know what it is, what's drawing my eye towards those. The Rakdos one, the top one here, is quite nice too. And then you have your Guild lands on here. So there's a lot going on. There's more spoilers every day right now. You're going to see this set, I believe, fully spoiled by next week. And then going into the 19th, you're going into pre-release. So hopefully it does very well for a pre-release. Do go out and support your local LGS, and I would sign up for your pre-release soon, because the set is looking like it's going to make some waves, possibly in Modern, especially with this one Spirit. Another card to look out for was from M19, is the Blue Spirit that gives all your spirits +1/+1. Now that we're seeing a lot of spirits in this particular set, you're probably going to see that card also spike up. It's been staying pretty dormant before a lot of the spirits came out, but now you have Afterlife and other spirits that are doing Enter the Battle triggers. Well, that's what I got for the spoilers so far. Geez, it became a much longer video than I wanted it to be, but if you stuck through it, thank you for doing that. Don't forget to leave any comments down below. How can I make these better? These spoiler videos are quite long to do, surprisingly enough. A few thoughts there. And I hope you found this quite informative, and maybe spec on some extra cards that you weren't looking at, and maybe they're off your radar. Anyway, thank you everyone. Have a great day.